discussion today. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So thank you all very much for joining again. So this is our first Manasiksha discussion for the year of 2021. So I wish you all a very happy New Year, Krishna conscious New Year. So may 2021 be much better than 2020. So I'm sure we all must have learned very valuable lessons. Even though the 2020 was not that great, but definitely each one of us must have learned something about ourselves which we did not know before. I'm sure we must have unearthed some hidden talents in us, some wonderful potentials which only the lockdown has brought out of us. So I'm sure, in that sense, even though 2020 is, I think for all the unfortunate things, I think there are many things which are quite fortunate also. If we reflect upon it, I'm sure we must have learned valuable lessons. We must all have become more tough, tenacious, and ready to face the world little more than what we were before. But let's hope that 2021 is better in whatever way Krishna wants. And let us all pray that whatever situation Krishna puts in, let us all pray that he gives us the intelligence and the strength to respond in a way that would make Krishna actually proud. And that would make Krishna very pleased that yes, here is my son or daughter, and I'm very proud, how wonderfully they responded to this difficult situation that, I put them in, and I'm so glad that they responded in such wonderful ways. So let's pray to Krishna that whatever situation he may choose to put us in this new year, let him also give us the intelligence and the strength to actually respond to those situations in a way that would make our Guru proud, that would make Krishna proud of us, that yes, this is exactly what I expected from him or her, and they responded so wonderfully like that. So that way we can take our baby step towards Krishna's lotus feet. So with that, I wish you all a very happy New Year, and we will start. And hopefully, in 2020, we did not miss a single week of. We could do 22 sessions, which means 22 weeks of Manasiksha discussion in 2020, and without any break. So, which is very good. And hopefully in 2021, we will have 52 weeks of Manasiksha without any break. Let us hope and pray for that. And then till whenever Krishna allows us, we will continue Manasiksha, and after that some other book we can do. So all, of course, we will be discussing some Krishna conscious subject matter, but this Sangha is very important. And honestly speaking, because it's a new year, I am just sharing with you. Honestly speaking, it's a very humbling experience for me. There are so many wonderfully qualified devotees who are participating here, and and many are much more qualified than me. You should actually be speaking, and I could see it very clearly from many of the questions that come up in our discussions. And honestly speaking, from the question, you can easily understand the uh, the caliber of the devotee who is asking these questions. So honestly speaking, many times when these questions come up, I feel very embarrassed and mm, not so qualified to answer this question, because the you know honestly, I don't find myself at that particular level. But nevertheless, it has been a very wonderful learning experience for me, and I hope it has been to you also, because such wonderful nectar our acharyas and the current acharyas are sharing their wisdom and realizations. I'm sure it must have been very nourishing for you also. So we will continue our discussion. So we are in the second verse of Manasiksha, and we will chant the verse and then we will continue. न धर्मं न धर्मं श्रुतिगणनिरुक्तं किल कुरु व्रजे राधा कृष्णा प्रचुर परिचर्यामिह तनो शची सोनुं नन्दीश्वर पतिसुतत्वे गुरुवरम् मुकुंद प्रेष्ठत्वे स्मर परमजस्रं ननु मना. So in this verse, Srila Raghunath Das Goswami says, "Na dharmam kuru, na adharmam kuru." Do not act in this material world with the considerations of dharma and adharma. Rather, vraje radha krishna prachura paricharya mihatanu. Act for the pleasure of pleasing Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan, and have as an aspiration a desire to perform relentless loving service to Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. And what should be our approach to worship of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? He says that Shachi Sonum Nandishwara Pati Sutatve Smaramana. My dear mind, don't see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is any different from Krishna. In fact, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Radha Krishna Nahe Anya. Don't see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as being different from Radha and Krishna. So in that way, we should understand that by worshipping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we actually gain the qualification to worship Radha and Krishna. Guruvaram Param Mukunda Preshtatve Smaramana. And my dear mind, see the Guru as the closest associate and servant of Radha and Krishna. And see him as that personality who is capable of establishing your relationship with Radha and Krishna. So in that way, actually, worship of Guru and worship of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is extremely complementary and favorable to our aspiration of worshipping Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. That is what the second verse talks about. And in this, we have already discussed the explanations of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Shivram Swami Maharaj, and Srila Shaktinandan Swami Maharaj. And we just started discussing Bhakti Vigyan Goswami Maharaj commentary to this verse. So I think we will directly start from there. Yeah, some very nice points from Shachinandan Swami Maharaj commentary also we saw last time. If you remember, he spoke about the 6 things that are important when we go to a dham. Like the first thing he said is learn to offer obeisances. As many obeisances as possible. This is the first thing Maharaj spoke about. And then the second thing he said is prayers. Learn to offer prayers to the various deities, Dham, the dust of Vrindavan, Yamuna, and Govardhan, all of that. And third is absorb. Third, he mentioned is actually mm, uh, prayers, obeisances, and the third thing he mentioned is yeah, render some tangible service to the Dham. While you are there, render some tangible service, physical service, sweeping the floor. And the fourth thing that Maharaj mentioned is that learn to sacrifice your material possessions, some money, some wealth for the upkeep of the Dham, for upkeep of the deities, for upkeep of the sadhus. So this is the fourth thing Maharaj mentioned. And then the fifth thing, anyone can recollect the fifth and sixth? You can please type and let me know. Yeah, the fifth thing is to learn to meditate on the lotus feet of the Lord. This is called as Smaranam. Taking darshan of the deities and meditating on the form of the deities. And sixth is Shravanam. Sufficiently hear about the glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So these six things. So in one sense, if you see, our home is Dham, the temple is Dham in one sense. So it's not that we have to go to the Dham to offer obeisances. We have to go to the Dham to offer prayers. We have to go to the Dham to actually sacrifice, do some physical service. We have to go to the Dham to actually sacrifice our resources. It's not that we have to go to the Dham to actually meditate on the form of the Lord and hear about the Lord. So all these six things can be performed while we are at one's home also, because at home also we have Vaishnavas, we have deities, and everything. But in the Dham, it is all the more powerful. But even otherwise, when we go to our local temple, or even while at home, we could practice all of these six things. So if we keep meditating on these six things, then it gives a very powerful engagement of our senses and mind throughout the day. So this was something very wonderful Maharaj suggested in his commentary. And Srila Bhakti Vigyan Goswami Maharaj's commentary, last time we started discussing this first theme, which is one pointed in our goal. So Maharaj spoke about this point. So Maharaj mentioned that he says that this second verse of Manas Siksha contains a very important element, which is the principle of a single goal. Vraje Radha Krishna Prachura Paricharya Mihatanu. Worship Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. Okay. So he says that in this material world, the problem with this various kinds of material dharma, or the lack of material dharma, and outright hedonistic lifestyle that one might live, or materialistic lifestyle that one might live in this world, the problem with that is it is many branched. Bahushaka hi anantascha buddhayo avyavasayinam. It is many branched. It gives us an opportunity to run here and there to fulfill many of our desires. That is a big obstacle. And he says that, so this is the problem with a person who follows the regular dharma in terms of, one's performance of varnashram dharma for attaining some material benefits or whatever it may be. Okay. But the prescription for the person who has chosen bhakti and wants to attain bhakti is just one. Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana. It is only one. And Maharaj mentioned that God is not just one of those goals, but God is the only goal. Which means the purpose of our life is to establish that relationship with Krishna and nothing else. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. Give up all other dharma and just surrender unto me, he says. And also Krishna discourages people from worshipping demigods in Bhagavad Gita, because this again is avidhi purvakam, not the right kind of worship. And also eventually he discourages worshipping the Supreme Lord for a material purpose also. So we cannot consider the Supreme Lord to be just a tool for fulfilling our desires. So all these things actually don't give us one-pointed attention, and if one-pointed attention is not there, it is very difficult to become successful in accomplishing any goal. And he gave the example of Dronacharya teaching archery to the Pandavas and Kauravas, and he gives the example of how when Dronacharya asked each one of his students to tell him what they were seeing in that particular tree. Someone told everything, someone told the tree, someone told I am seeing only that branch, and someone told that I am seeing only that bird. But only Arjuna said, I am seeing just the eye and nothing else. And then he shot like that. So he gives this example to indicate that it is this quality that we need to develop. When we look, we should not see anybody except Krishna. So this should be our kind of focus. What will please Krishna? What will please Guru? What will please Krishna? What will please Guru? Like that. But in conditioned life, we look and we see Maya, which means we see things not connected to Krishna, and therefore we see that, okay, this is not connected to Krishna, so therefore I can enjoy it like that. So then he says, as we practice, as Raghunath Das Goswami speaks about in this verse, we gradually stop seeing everything else. And when we do not see anything else, then our hearts are filled by faithfulness towards God, just like a faithful wife towards her husband. So this is gradually one develops this quality. And he says that that in Vedic culture, he says Vedic culture first teaches a person to be chaste in an ordinary way, and then subsequently it like for example, be chaste to your dharma, follow your varna, Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna Paradharmo Sonashtitat Swadharme Hinitaram Shreya Paradharmo Bayavaha. Like that, be chaste to your dharma, be chaste to your wife, like that. But then the highest level of chastity also our Vedic scriptures talk, which is chastity only to Krishna through a bona fide Guru Sishya Parampara and nothing else. Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityetan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 14th chapter, Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. So one who worships me with avyabhicharena bhakti. So avyabhichari means a person who is not of a good character. He or she may actually be not very fixed in with their partners. They may keep changing. That is vyabhichari. So avyabhichari means one who is very chaste. Avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate means one whose object of worship is only Krishna and the means of worship is only Navada Bhakti. Okay. So when one worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead only as the object of worship, and one accepts only Navada Bhakti as the means of worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he performs Avyabhichari Bhakti towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there are different levels of chastity in Bhakti. One is worship only Krishna and no other demigod. This is one level of chastity. Then the second level of chastity is not just with the object of worship, but the means of worship. That is only Navada Bhakti and not Karma Mishra Bhakti, Jnana Mishra Bhakti, Yoga Mishra Bhakti, like that. And the third level is purity of our goal, purity of our prayojan. So the goal is only Krishna and nothing else. Anyabhilashita Shunyam. So in that way there are multiple levels of chastity when it comes to worshipping Krishna also. So one is Krishna only is the object of worship. That is first level of chastity. And Navada Bhakti is only the means of worship. That is the second level of chastity. And Krishna only is the goal of worship. This is the third level of chastity. So, so if one's practice of bhakti should have all these three elements. It should be Anyabhilashita Shunyam, it should be Jnana Karmadi Anavritam, and it should be Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. Only worship of Krishna and not any demigods or like that. So, but if one does not have that level of chastity, at least one should have, one should be chaste to one's own dharma, and as far as possible through his dharma or as a part of his dharma, he should worship only the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and no one else, like that. And here Raghunath Das Goswami says, Na dharmam, na dharmam, shrutigana niruktam kilakuru. Reject all dharma and all adharma for Krishna's sake. And which means you develop the consideration or act with that mood that, you know, I will do everything that will please Krishna and I will reject everything that displeases Krishna. So acting with that mood or attitude is what is Raghunath Das Goswami indicating here. So he says, we wear a kantimala and eat with our right hand instead of four because it pleases Krishna. So if it would please Krishna, I would do it. And a chaste wife decorates herself with ornaments only for her husband. In the same way, we must adorn ourselves with our virtues and qualities, not for the sake of the virtues themselves or to make a show of these virtues, but so that Krishna enjoys them. So we may try to act humble, we may try to act tolerant, we may try to tolerate our urge to eat that vada pav from, you know, that vada pav dukan, you know that shop. I may exhibit that tolerant, but that tolerance and humility and all these things should be exhibited for the pleasure of Guru and Krishna. And this is the meaning of chastity at the highest level. Like that. So we keep this secret deep in our heart. I am following this dharma, all that Krishna wants me to, for the sake of pleasing him. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. And then Maharaj spoke about there were different categories of gopis. Of course, the Nitya Siddha gopis and then the Sadhana Siddha gopis were there. The Nitya Siddha gopis are the eternally perfect gopis who descended from Goloka Vrindavan to perform the Bhauma Leela pastimes. And of course, some of the Sadhana Siddha gopis like Vedas personified who took the form of gopis, or the Rishichari gopis who are like the Dandakaranya rishis who also aspired to join the pastimes of Krishna. They practiced sadhana and achieved perfection. And those gopis also were given an opportunity to participate in the Bhaumalila pastimes. And Maharaj mentions that some of them were almost purified, but with some trace amounts of impurities in the form of some attachment to dharma was there. So, therefore, when Krishna on the day of Ras Leela, when he was playing his flute, uh, the Nityasiddha gopis ran. No one stopped them. They joined. And amongst the sadhana siddha gopis, some of them who had trace amounts of impurities in the form of attachment to the regular dharma, like they were thinking, oh, actually, Krishna is playing his flute, I have to go and join him. But what will society think if I leave my husband and family and go and join Krishna? Hmm? Of course, this is a very valid thought process, but even that trace of attachment to dharma, Krishna is uh, Krishna is requesting to give up. So what happened is that actually they had that this conflicting emotions of intense eagerness to go and meet Krishna, but also that hesitation to act against dharma. So therefore, when the husbands would come and stop them, the fire of that eagerness to meet Krishna would burn up their residual impurities in the form of attachment to dharma, and then they would give up that body, external body, and in their purified spiritual body, they would go and join the Ras Leela. That is the explanation that is given. So basically, Maharaj is giving this example here to indicate that how if ultimately we would want to we have to join the uh, the pastimes of Krishna, then we will have to give up our attachment to the last traces of dharma. Hmm? So which means we have to perfectly act on the platform of uh, what would please Krishna and what would displease Krishna, and give up the consideration of dharma and adharma. And as we discussed again, because this theme will keep coming again and again, and I would really like to clarify it here once more, uh, that actually there is a very significant overlap of what is commonly understood as dharmic activities and what is generally favorable for um, pleasing Krishna as part of devotional activities. Actually, there is not much difference in terms of the activities themselves. Mostly, uh, dharmic activities are actually can be dovetailed in a very Krishna conscious way. And generally, those activities which Krishna like, which are pleasing to Krishna, are generally dharmic only. So therefore, it is not that a person who accepts the path of bhakti suddenly starts acting in a very non-religious adharmic way. It is not like that. Uh, So he is not asking us to give up those activities themselves, but actually he is asking us to give up the consideration of dharma and adharma, and he is requesting us to act on the platform of bhakti anukul and bhakti pratikul on that platform, like that. Okay. So Maharaj writes here, when a person retains even the slightest attachment to the notion of being something other than a person who loves Krishna, this attach this is attachment to pride. Hmm. So Gopi Vartur Padakamalayur Dasa Dasanudas. That is, of course, on a practical level, we may not be able to always act on that platform. Uh, but at least from a theoretical point of view, we should be convinced that except for this upadhi, all my other upadhis is fit to be given up. And it's an obstacle to attain my goal of establishing a relationship with Krishna. One should be convinced of this. And it is a symptom of pride. Any other upadhi is a symptom of pride. So this attachment to pride can become manifest even as attachment to virtues, and it will create an obstacle on the way. So sometimes, like we see this in the case of Yudhishthir Maharaj also on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, when Krishna asked him to speak a lie, his attachment to that dharma, actually he hesitated to speak that lie. Okay, so this is in one sense an example of our attachment to virtue when it creates an obstacle to bhakti. But many times we want to give up our virtues, or the so-called or moral and dharmic ways in the name of bhakti because of laziness, not because it is favorable for Krishna, or Krishna would like that we give up that particular activity, but mostly we give that up in the name of bhakti because we are lazy. So that's not what he is mentioning here. So in the process of spiritual practice, we must overcome all these hindrances, and when we overcome these internal obstacles, then the external ones will disappear. So Maharaj gives this example of how the gopis had the internal obstacle of attachment to dharma. Therefore, the external obstacle manifested in the form of their husbands coming and bolting the door. And many times, when our internal obstacles vanish, then automatically the external obstacles will also vanish like that. Then when we hear the sound of Krishna's flute, we will run and dance and embrace Krishna, like that Maharaj says. We should clearly understand that we have only one goal, which is love for Krishna. And the only way to achieve this goal is by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. We do not need anything else. Okay, so this is where we ended our discussion last week. Before we move on to today's discussion, I will just pause to see if there are any quick comments, questions, discussions based on what we have recapped today or what we discussed last week. If there are any unanswered queries, comments, discussions, we can take for a few minutes. So I'll just wait to see if there are any hands up. Yeah, there are a few hands. Yashoda Gopika Mataji, I'm unmuting you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Prabhuji, I was just thinking that at times we miss going to Dham, and it is not for Krishna's pleasure. Maybe because as devotee, our senses are dovetailed. So when it is not for Krishna's pleasure and it is only for our pleasure, because had it been Krishna's pleasure, we should have been satisfied as Marobi Rakhobi. But it is not the case. We are missing dhamas. So how to categorize it as devotee? Is it our endeavor, or is it a spiritual sense gratification or separation? How to take it?
Okay. I mean, if I understood your question right, you are asking that I will unmute you, Mataji, because till there's just one request. Till I answer the question, if you don't unmute yourself.
Yeah, sure, Prabhuji. It was in error. Yeah.
Yeah, in general, I'm telling to others also, because what happens, because there could be a dialogue, because if sometimes I may not understand the question right, you may want to clarify, and suddenly when you want to clarify, you won't be able to unmute yourself because I will have to give you permission to unmute. So then it becomes back and forth, and especially your name starts with Y, so then I have to scroll through all the way and last name. So okay. So if I understood your question right, Mataji, sometimes we may go to Dham not with
No, Prabhuji, we miss going to dhams. At times we miss going to dhams. Like it was COVID and we were missing going to Vrindavan and dhams.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then when we miss going to these places, it is not for Krishna's pleasure. It is, I mean, we are more concerned about our pleasure.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. I mean, if you are missing the dhams, what is it that you miss in the dhams?
It's us being there.
Matlab, for what purpose?
I mean, the same darshan of deities and all.
Yeah, I mean, that is actually the darshan of deities, visiting various important places where Krishna performed his pastimes. Because otherwise, if you see staying in a city like Mumbai or you get much better scope for sense gratification and enjoyment. But if someone is actually missing the dham, um, uh, I mean, I think it's a very, very wonderful thing. And we may not think, oh, uh, I am not thinking in this way for the pleasure of Krishna. But I mean, um, then for whose pleasure actually? I mean, one's own pleasure means what kind of pleasure that you would get in a dham like Vrindavan that you don't get in a city like Mumbai or Delhi or Bangalore actually. So, so the kind of pleasure that we want is to take darshan of the deities of the Lord and visit the other holy places that may be there. And we might be missing hearing, uh, uh, you know, the lecture of our Guru Maharaj in the association of thousands and thousands of devotees. We might be missing meeting our friends from various parts of the world, during the yatra, and spend time with each other, catching up with each other. I mean, these are, I mean, if this is our understanding and our conception of happiness and gratification, this is extremely uncool for our progress in Krishna consciousness. And I don't think we need to feel guilty that, oh, I am desiring to go to Dham for my own pleasure. But we have already subordinated that pleasure um, to the pleasure of Krishna. Because I am sure before coming to Krishna consciousness, we must have had various other means of gratification, but we have subordinated all of that, and um, uh, we want to, uh, we have subordinated all of those external desires, and we are trying to act in such a way that would be pleasing to Krishna. And it is Krishna's reciprocation that he has made those activities very, very pleasurable for us. So, so therefore, I don't think we need to feel, uh, guilty for that. In fact, it is very good. This is an indication that probably we are progressing in spiritual life. That instead of missing some material things, we are missing dhams, and this is really perfection of life, actually, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. Fairly answered. Yes.
Madhavi Gopi Mataji, I am unmuting you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Prabhuji.
Dandavat.
Prabhuji, today we discussed that some of the gopis who had trace of the material dharma in them, they face the problem, and because of means as their internal environment was, the external environment appeared in the same way. And in the previous classes, we have also discussed, you had given the Maharaj's example that he had asked some of the, one of the Mataji who was working in the kitchen, that what are you doing here? Like you are supposed to, your seva is at home because your child is small. Like, so how we understand, means I was thinking that this understanding that some of the gopis had some trace of the material dharma in them, how it is useful for us. And really when someone transcends that line, and we can say that yes, now this material dharma is not for, as a devotee, how we can understand this. And the other aspect of the question is that it is also said that whatever activities we do throughout the day, like in the 11th canto, the second chapter, this shlok also, na, that kayana manasa, that thing.
Mhm.
So it is also said that we should offer all our activities right from the day begins to Krishna. That is the perfection. Like you don't. So
Mhm.
how we understand these things? How we all these things?
Okay. So your first question was, how do we understand that the gopis had some trace of material dharma, while here was in our practical life we saw this example that I had quoted, that here was one Mataji actually personally cooking for Krishna, whereas her spiritual master came and he told, what are you doing here? Your devotional service is at home to take care of the child. So these are, if you see, two slightly different issues. Actually, let us take the second case of this devotee. This devotee actually had a little bit of a short-sighted understanding of what constitutes devotional service. Like she thought that, oh, cooking for Krishna is devotional service, and taking care of my child is not devotional service. It is an act of um, maybe some mundane dharma. So this is what her spiritual master corrected. He said, no, it is not in the activity itself, but it is in the mood with which you perform that activity. If you now take care of your child will grow up into a wonderful devotee if he receives that warmth and affection from you at the right age. So that is very much an act of devotion. That's what uh, Maharaj was clarifying to that devotee. So here the addressing is the spiritual master is addressing a short-sighted understanding of the what constitutes devotional service, which was present within the mind of that particular devotee. But in the case of gopis, they didn't have any doubt. They were very clear that ultimately pleasing Krishna is the highest thing, and the best way to please Krishna is we should give up and go and join the Ras Leela. They knew that, but there were, in terms of their sort of, they were feeling little shy and embarrassed. That embarrassment was not gone. Like sometimes, when we have to go to a public place, and our workplaces, and if we have to go with our tilaks, we know that this is the best thing to do. We are not we don't have doubt about that, but that sense of little embarrassment that we may have, oh, how can I go with my kantimala and tilak, what will other people think of me, that kind of guilt, that kind of embarrassment, that is what the gopis felt. And for us, we are not socially acting in an outrageous way. We are just wearing some tilak, that's all. But for the gopis, right when their husbands, their children were there, their in-laws were there, their own parents were there, so leaving all of them and running to the forest in the middle of the night to be with another person, of course in this case it is Krishna, but to be with another person, it is not that they had even an iota of doubt that whether it is the right thing to do or not. They were convinced, but at the same time there is that little embarrassment that they had about what will other people think. So that is what actually is considered as impurity. But in terms of conviction, they were very clear. They didn't have the short-sighted understanding of a sadhaka. But they had that, because they had lived in the society for such a long time, that trace connections to the values of that society was slightly there, and that created some embarrassment which was sort of slowing them down. And as soon as, but it was very negligible. That is why when that external obstacle manifested, the fire of separation from Krishna was so powerful and raging that it immediately burned their bodies, and then they went to join the Ras Leela in their spiritual bodies. So this is slightly different thing. It is not exactly that the gopis were like sadhakas. Actually, it is mentioned that they were sadhana siddhas. They performed sadhana and they had already achieved perfection. So the situation is slightly different. I don't know if it addresses your question though, Mataji. If it is not, then you can sort of repeat your question. If it is
No,
not,
I understand the means the example which we had discussed and gopis. There is a lot of difference in the means the quality of devotion as well as means total. It is there is a lot of difference. But I was just thinking like means taking care of husband or their children, that is also devotional activity, and Krishna will be pleased in that doing of that activity. But maybe actually directly going to Krishna will be more pleasing because they had that option to go to directly Krishna and
oh,
please
in that case, in their case, they had come to the situation of bhava and prema, at which stage they cannot relate much with their own family members that well. It can happen, it need not happen also. So their case was different. In our case, we have not reached that stage where we can't relate with any of our material, not material, these are also spiritual relationships only, relationships between Vaishnavas, but they have that relationship of being mother and son, or husband and wife, father and daughter, like that. We still very much relate to it in that way, and we feel nourished in such interactions. But when one reaches the stage of bhava and prema, where one's relationship with Krishna is very tangibly established and there is tangible reciprocation that is happening between them, at that stage, to relate with these kind of relationships become very difficult. So we cannot prematurely give that up also. Is that okay, Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji. And that's what I said, that I understood the difference is very vast. So, whatever you said was quite explanatory. But when then we say, Prabhuji, that this Kayana Vacha, we should offer all our activities to Krishna, means at our level, wherever we are.
Yeah. Wherever we are at that level, we offer it.
So
We do it for the
offer
pleasure of Krishna.
means how we should be doing, like is there process that or mentally we should keep offering, because in if we see the purport of that shloka, no, it is written that even the smallest of activity like washing your mouth or brushing your teeth, that also should be offered to Krishna. Everything has to be offered to Krishna.
Yeah.
So I was confused, like what is the method? Like mentally, we should say that whatever we are doing, I'm doing maybe because all these small activities are for maintaining the body's health, and if body is maintained, we can serve the Krishna in a better manner. Otherwise, more time will be spent in taking care of body if it falls. So is it the right understanding or?
Yeah, correct. So it is a logic behind performing those activities in a particular way. So we wake up early. We understand that I keep my alarm at 3:30, 4 o'clock for the purpose of waking up, taking, getting ready and attending Mangalarti or chanting my rounds, So every single activity, like the process of offering, that comes more in the, performing an activity and offering it to Krishna. That is more like the action of a karma yogi. He performs the activity and then offers the fruits to Krishna. Whereas for a devotee, he is performing mostly he is trying to perform those activities which are favorable for Krishna's pleasure. So before even he offers, Krishna already accepts it. So there is no, it's not that you chant one round and you need to say that Krishna, I offer this round to you. So we are already doing those activities which please Krishna. So we don't have to separately do an act of offering that to Krishna. That is already accepted by Krishna. So like that. So that's how is the explanation the acharyas give. Like for example, yat karoshi yadashnasi yat juhosi dadasi yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat kurushva madarpanam. So this 9.27 Bhagavad Gita, this verse, this is like karma mishra bhakti. So where whatever one does, one offers the fruits to Krishna. But the practice of pure devotional service is slightly different. We tend to do those activities which are pleasurable to Krishna only. So we work within the realm of anukulyasya sankalpo pratikulyasya varjanam. Whatever is anukul we try to do, whatever is pratikul we try to avoid. So with that conception, whatever activity is performed, it need not be externally offered to Krishna, because those activities are chosen only on the consideration of what is pleasing to Krishna and what is displeasing to Krishna. It is already accepted by Krishna. There is no external, there is no separate need for offering that to Krishna like that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Gopinandini Mataji, I am unmuting you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavat.
Dandavat, Mataji.
Prabhuji, I was thinking the Brahmana Patni's pastime also, where they come to meet Krishna and he tells them, you go back and do your dharma. And here you're saying performing dharma, dharma, adharma, don't see in that sense. Perform it as anukulya sankalpa and pratikulya varjanam, like that you do it karke. So I was confused in that sense. The gopis, you're saying they had the trace of this thing, and here Krishna himself told the Brahmana Patnis, go and perform your dharma. So how do we understand that?
No, he told them, you go back and then I will ensure that even though your husbands and family members have seen you come to the forest against their wishes, they will still accept you back. And see, even within the realm of gopis, I don't exactly recollect the explanation of the acharyas in that particular part, but I will give a generic understanding. But then I will refer to it and then I will exactly get back to you. But the generic understanding is that even within the gopis or those who are at the level of Madhurya Rasa, there are various gradations. There are amongst the closest gopis, there are Vipaksha gopis who are in Chandravali's side. Then there are neutral gopis who are sometimes they may side with Radharani's side and sometimes they may side with Chandravali's side. They are called as neutral gopis. And then there are Supaksha gopis. The Supaksha gopis are those who side with Radharani's side of gopis. Then the fourth category is Swapaksha gopis, who are the Ashtasakis. Lalita, Vishaka, Tunga Vidya, Rangadevi, and so on. And then there is Radharani herself. So in this way, the gopis of Vrindavan, there are multiple categories, and Krishna's reciprocation with each one of them is actually different. So in the very first verse of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami explains this. Akhila Rasamrita Murti Prashramara Ruchiruddha Taraka Pali Kalita Shama Lalito Radha Preyan Vidur Jayati. So he explains, this verse indicates how Krishna reciprocates with various kinds of gopis. He says, Prashramara Ruchiruddha Taraka Pali. So he says Taraka belongs to Chandravali's group, Vipaksha. And Palika belongs to the neutral gopi. So with these two of them, he says Prashramara Ruchiruddha Taraka Pali. So with these gopis, Krishna reciprocates by attracting them with his beauty. That's all. There is no mention of any personal transaction with them. So Krishna, it is even within Madhurya Rasa, there are gradations of reciprocations of Krishna with them. Like if you see, and then he says, Prashramara Ruchiruddha Taraka Pali, Kalita Shama Lalita. Shama is a Supaksha Gopi, and Lalita is the head of the Swapaksha Gopi, Swapaksha Gopis. So with them, Kalita Shama Lalito Radha. With them, he embraces them. So which means there is a little more intimate reciprocation with them. And Radha Preyan, while he does everything for pleasing Radharani, like that. So even within the various categories of gopis, Krishna's reciprocation is not exactly the same. So it is not that. So therefore, in my understanding, I will still try to check and exactly give you the explanation which the acharyas give for this particular episode. But Krishna's way of reciprocation is different with different gopis, and sometimes it may even happen that, like in the case of Narada Muni, he gave that darshan once, and then he allowed him to develop that intense longing and hankering to see that form again. And in that intense hankering for seeing that form again, in that fire of separation from Krishna, the whatever trace impurities were there, they got burnt, and then he got his spiritual body again. So it could be either one of these things, but I will, as I told you, I will check exactly how the acharyas explain in this particular episode, why they were asked to go back. He said that they had some trace attachment to dharma which Krishna could foresee, or he said that they had some other impurities which Krishna wanted to purify before they join him eternally, or he said that they belonged to a class of gopis with whom he preferred to have a more distant kind of reciprocation, because that's what is more agreeable to them. So I will actually confirm and I will let you know. I don't know the exact reason, but it could be one of these reasons. In principle.
Thank you, bro. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So if there are no further discussions, so we will move on to today's discussion. Let's see what Maharaj has to say. So the next theme that Maharaj speaks about, we are discussing His Holiness Bhakti Vigyan Goswami Maharaj's commentary to this verse. He speaks about Guru and Chaitanya, Guru and Lord Chaitanya. If you remember, he says, Guruvaram Mukunda Preshtatve Smaramana, Sachi Sonum Nandishwara Pati Sutatve Smaramana. So these were the two things that we saw. So Maharaj says, Raghunath Das Goswami says, Vraje Radha Krishna Prachura Paricharya Mihatanu. I start worshipping Radha and Krishna. Then he says, Shachi Sonum Nandishwara Pati. How I should see Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya, the son of Shachi, I should see as the son of Nanda Maharaj. Vrajendra Nandana Jai Sachi Sutta Hoilo Sei Balaram Hoilo Nitai. Narottam Das Thakur writes. When we worship Lord Chaitanya, we worship him as Krishna. We see him as Krishna who brought us love of God and came to teach us love of God. So we see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the most merciful and magnanimous incarnation of Krishna. In fact, our attachment to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and gratitude to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu should be more than our attachment and gratitude to Krishna himself. Because in this form, he actually comes to share that love of Godhead. But Krishna, through his beauty and qualities, he attracts us. But the means of attaining that, developing that attraction towards Krishna, that process is brought by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu only. And then he says, my Guru I should see as Mukunda Preshta. In other words, Raghunath Das Goswami says to learn to see one goal in everything we do. So therefore, how is it that Raghunath Das Goswami says that there should be one goal, but at the same time in one verse he has given 3 goals. One is to worship Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan, but he also said worship Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, worship the Guru. So how is it one goal? Isn't it 3 goals? He says no, it is one goal only, because which is worshipping Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is non-different from Radha and Krishna, so therefore worshipping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is non-different from worshipping Radha and Krishna. And again, Guru is the closest associate of Krishna, Mukunda Preshta. And so therefore, and not only that, he is our means of establishing our connection with Krishna. So therefore, worshipping him is in one sense non-different, or it's very, very favorable and complementary to worshipping Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. We want to come to Krishna. We don't want to come to anything else, because there is nothing else we need except Krishna. We need love for Krishna. We need chastity in our hearts. That is what Raghunath Das Goswami asks his mind in the 2nd verse. So therefore he says, give up everything else. Na dharmam, na dharmam, shrutigana niruktam kilakuru. Give up this consideration of dharma, adharma and all these things. You need Krishna. Everything else should not become an end in itself for you. You should learn this art of how to connect everything you do to a single goal, to see that at the end of everything is Krishna, who is bent at 3 places. With his flute to his lips, who is calling us all to dance. So this is the principle of Anukulyasya Sankalpo Pratikulyasya Varjanam. We accept Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's worship because it is Anukul. We accept worship of the Guru because it is Anukul for our practice of Bhakti towards Radha and Krishna and Vrindavan. So in that mode we accept the worship of Sri Guru and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is the next theme that he discusses. About worship of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Guru. I think we have discussed this sufficiently while discussing the commentaries of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Sachinandan Maharaj, but still I will wait for a few seconds to see if there are any quick comments or questions on this part. Okay, so we will continue. The next theme that Maharaj discusses is Sattva Guna, detachment, faith and love. That is how he titles this theme. So let's see what Maharaj has to say. So Maharaj says, Krishna establishes some principles, adherence to which allows us to gradually purify our hearts. So many principles, depending on the faith of the practitioner also. So if someone is qualified for dharma, he has given the varnashram dharma, which when practiced in a very detached way leads to purification of heart. And similarly, for those qualified for practice of bhakti, he has given certain principles which when practiced also purifies the heart, like that. When our hearts are pure, what should then appear in our hearts? When our heart is pure, then what should appear in our heart? Love won't immediately appear, but gradually, by following the principles of dharma. So here, when Maharaj speaks about following the principles of dharma, Maharaj clarifies, he says, the 4 regulative principles and the other principles of Vedic culture, we will rise to the level of sattva. So Maharaj is basically indicating that not only should we just practice bhakti, but our lifestyle should also be conducive for this principle of anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam. Which means a lifestyle which enhances sattva guna. Because sattva guna is doubtable in Krishna's service. Rajogun and tamogun are not doubtable in Krishna's service. Rajogun has to be given up, tamogun has to be given up. There is no question of doubting rajas and tamas. Okay, many times we hear devotees just like that say, Prabhuji, actually I have so much rajogun, it has to be doubted in Krishna's service. Na? Actually, no. Rajogun or tamogun are not doubtable in Krishna's service. Actually, by practice of bhakti, one has to give up rajogun and tamogun. Then the sattva activities, the sattva inclinations, they can be doubted in Krishna's service. Otherwise, rajas and tamas are not compatible. You cannot, for example, cook a rajoguni or tamoguni item and ideally should be offering it to Krishna, because Krishna says that, I like sattoguni items, so we should cook sattoguni items and offer it to Krishna and then honor. That is the best course of action. So therefore he says that love won't immediately appear, but gradually, by following the principles of dharma, the 4 regulative principles and the other principles of Vedic culture, we will rise to the level of sattva. So a lifestyle which is conducive to bhakti is also important. So we don't independently try to choose sattva everywhere. Our purpose of choosing sattva also is based on okay, whatever is best for my bhakti, I will choose. If sattva is best, I will choose sattva. If rajas is best, I will choose rajas. If tamas is best, I don't mind, I will choose tamas. But the fact is that rajas and tamas are not doubtable in Krishna's service. So therefore, we don't choose. In Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto, Krishna says that sattva and dharma are synonymous. That sattva strengthens dharma and dharma strengthens sattva. Okay. When one performs one's dharma, gradually it enhances one's sattva. And when one tries to maintain a sattvaguni atmosphere, sattvaguni lifestyle, then it enhances one's capacity to practice that dharma also. Like that. So we know this quite well. Like very, very simple example, you wake up and sit inside your bedding only, and you start chanting without even switching on the light, without even washing our mouth. Of course, tatrarpita niyamita smaranena kalaha. There are no hard and fast rules for chanting the holy name, but nevertheless we know that within a few minutes we will be fast asleep again, because it is still quite tamoguni, and especially if it is cold, and if we see on our left and right everyone is sleeping, like at least in the ashram it's like that. Sometimes you have deity worship, and if you don't complete your rounds before deity worship, then throughout the day you won't get time to complete the rounds. So sometimes we may have to wake up quite early before everyone else wakes up, so that we can complete our rounds, so that we will our rounds won't be pending after deity worship. But sometimes you see, you wake up in the ashram, and especially when it's winter, and at GV where I stay, it's quite cold during winters, especially at night and early mornings. So, and in one room, there are some 10, 12 devotees sleeping in their mosquito nets. And it's so cold, and your alarm rings at 2 o'clock in the morning, or 2, 5, 2, 10, like that. And then you see everyone else sleeping around you blissfully, and you're also feeling very sleepy, and the blanket is so cozy, and you don't want to come out. You think that, okay, let me just sit here in the mosquito net only and chant a few rounds. And then you start chanting, and within no time you are already asleep, and after 1 hour you wake up, like that. So, but if you just come out, take a nice bath, and then apply nice tilak, and then sit and chant, it is much more possible to chant and stay focused, and it's much more conducive for practicing our devotional service. So therefore he says that sattva strengthens dharma and dharma strengthens sattva. So in our understanding, our dharma is devotional service. So when we practice devotional service, actually it helps us come more to a level of sattva. But someone may say, oh, but devotional service is not in sattva. Devotional service is supposed to help us transcend all the three modes. Why do you say that by chanting, by performing devotional service, I will come to sattva? Yes, this is true. Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatirtetan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. Krishna does say that by practice of devotional service, one overcomes all the three modes. But actually, if you see in reality, by practice of devotional service, we transcend the first two modes, the two lower modes, Rajas and Tamas first, and then subsequently one transcends the Sattva Guna also. So at the stage of Nishta Ruchi, Tada Rajastamo Bhava Kamalobha Dayasche Chetayetairana Viddham Sthitam Sattve Prasidati. One actually overcomes the influence of the two lower modes, Rajas and Tamas first, and then gradually, when one reaches the stage of Bhava and Prema, one actually transcends the influence of Sattva Guna also. So therefore, when one practices one's dharma, especially our dharma is devotional service, one naturally first tends to overcome the influence of the Rajogun and Tamogun, and one tries to come to the level of Sattva. Therefore, he says, Sattva strengthens dharma and dharma strengthens Sattva. Like that. So, purity or adherence to the principles of purity, following the principles of sattvic life, will make a person more religious, and religion makes a person live in more purity. So in our sense, in our case, a sattvic lifestyle will help us practice devotional service very nicely. And when we practice devotional service very nicely, naturally our Rajoguni and Tamoguni inclinations will go down, and our Sattvaguni inclinations will come up, like that. These are integrally related to each other. If we simply live a pure life, we will become more inclined to God, and this inclination will in turn make us live in an increasingly pure life. So this is, I am sure we all have an experience of this. So, you have a habit of, for no good reason, of course, for no good reason, if you have a habit of sleeping late and waking up late and every day chanting, in a hurry while traveling or something like that. Of course, there are genuine cases where they are so hard pressed for time that the only time that they get to chant is only during traveling. That is an exceptional case. But otherwise, if one can afford to sleep early and wake up early and chant, as much as possible in the early hours, and if one compromises that, then one's practice becomes very weak, actually. So therefore, if we simply live a pure life, we will become more inclined to God, and this inclination will in turn make us live in an increasingly pure life. But we do not need merely material purity or material sattva. Ultimately, purity will certainly result in love of God, but love is preceded by something else, that is faith. Therefore, Krishna explains to Uddhava in the Bhagavatam, Tavat karmani kurvita na nirvidyeta yavata matkata shravanadavva shraddha yavanna jayate. So, very famous verse, we have seen this many times. So, Maharaj says, if a person performs some dharma, some Vedic rituals, then gradually something wonderful happens. Na nirvidyeta yavata. Detachment from material world appears in our hearts. So this is some, let's say, the regular dharma like varnashrama dharma, like that. If someone performs varnashrama dharma, then what happens? Naturally, one's heart becomes purified. And when the heart becomes purified, then naturally detachment follows. Detachment from things of this world. If a person follows the principles of Vedic Dharma, what they attain is indifference to the temptations of the material world, which is the sign of purification of heart. So naturally, sincere practice of one's Varnashram Dharma purifies one's heart, and due to that purification of heart, naturally one develops some level of purification, some level of detachment from things of this world. A pure heart is the heart that is gradually drifting away from the temptations of the material world. So it does not get attached to the things of this world. As a result of detachment, faith in Krishna Katha will spring into our hearts. I mean, not as a result of detachment, but as a result of detachment, and on top of that, if there is association with devotees who are trying to inspire in our hearts a desire to serve Krishna, then it is possible. Just like if you have some, if you have some water in a glass, and if you want to take milk, so just by pouring out that water, it is not that your glass automatically gets filled with that milk. It is not like that. So you will have to throw out that water, and then you should have a source of milk close by who can fill that glass with milk. So similarly, just by practicing of Varnashram Dharma and purifying our heart, it is not that automatically we become inclined to worship Krishna, but there has to be the association of devotees who can instill that faith in our heart. Okay, and on top of that, if our heart is fairly pure, then progress becomes easier, because bhakti has to do very less hard work in trying to do anartha nivritti, because the anarthas are less. But anartha nivritti through practice of our Vedic Varnashram Dharma in itself cannot produce faith in worshipping Krishna. Faith in worshipping Krishna can come only through the association of devotees. Like that. But here the point is how you should be careful to maintain a lifestyle that is conducive for Krishna consciousness, and that lifestyle is actually Sattva-guni lifestyle. So as a result of detachment, faith in Krishna Katha will spring into our hearts. As we become more aloof from the stories of the material world, from all this Jada Katha or Maya Katha, proportionally faith in Krishna Katha appears. So the more we are watching, following the material news and material things, the less and less we will be inclined to hear Krishna Katha. We can clearly see it actually. The more we get attached to the news of this world, what's happening, the less and less we will be inclined to hear about what is happening in Goloka Vrindavan. By watching the news on TV, for instance, we actually strengthen our faith in Maya Katha. I do not know how many thousands of shlokas there are describing Maya Katha. But every day, there are more mundane stories in the form of films, the news, and everything else. But if a person begins following the principles of sattva, rising early in the morning, chanting japa, following other principles, then gradually they feel detachment from mundane katha and faith in Krishna katha. So this is very important, and for this very, very critical is the association of devotees. So even in COVID times, I have seen, I mean, this was personally a very humbling experience for me, and actually very, very inspiring for me. Actually, I could see that in the I'll give two examples. One is one of the devotees was sharing with me that there are counseling groups who would every day, many people would join the Zoom call, and every day morning from their houses they would join the morning japa, and they would have Bhagavatam classes, and throughout COVID times, this was such a wonderful sangha that even though one could not go to temple, but the attendance in these Zoom calls were like tremendous, I heard. And then in the United States, actually there is something called as Bhakti Sangha group, and some of you might know. In this Bhakti Sangha group, actually there are like many devotees, and every day morning, from morning 5 o'clock onwards till night 8-9 o'clock, they have constant programs. They have morning japa sessions, and then after japa they have morning Bhagavatam class. Then after morning Bhagavatam class, then some Matajis come together. They have Chaitanya Charitamrita classes. Then they have Brihad Bhagavatamrita classes. Then they have some kids classes. Then they have some kids games, crafts programs, like that throughout the day. And on Ekadashis, they all come together and chant 64 rounds. So, and I heard this has been going on for the last 12-15 years, during the days of Skype. So now from Skype, they have shifted to Zoom. And it was so inspiring, actually, really. And I could see that because of, even though they are geographically so many miles apart, but actually even through this virtual association through Zoom and other such things, they have developed such wonderful relationships with each other. And each one is inspiring each other so much to perform devotional service with such intensity. So it was a very, very humbling experience for me, and it was so inspiring. So actually, it is possible to have sustainable Sattva-guni environment around us only if we have that kind of a powerful devotees association, like that. So that is about this principle of Sattva, faith, and mode of goodness. What was, I forgot the exact title. Sattva Guna, detachment, faith, and love. So that is something that Maharaj speaks about in this theme of how important it is to how actually dharma enhances sattva and sattva enhances dharma, and the importance of a lifestyle that is conducive for our practice of devotional service that we discussed. So at this point, I will again pause for a few minutes to see if there is any quick comments, questions, discussions based on this theme that we discussed now. I will wait for a few seconds to see if there are any hands up. we will take some questions and then we can move forward. Anything on this theme of the importance of cultivating the sattva, or the importance of having a strong sattva-guni atmosphere which can potentially enhance our practice of devotional service? Anything? Okay, so I don't see any hands up. So, okay. Anadi Akshay Krishna Prabhu, I am unmuting you, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, Dandavata
Dandavata.
Prabhuji, I just had one small doubt. Like there's a very basic understanding and conception. Since we are discussing about the modes and bhakti, and how as we practice bhakti, the purification happens gradually. Like we first give up the tamaguna, rajoguna, and then come to sattva-guna, and then gradually we elevate ourselves beyond sattva. So the question is that when we talk about purification, is it do we mean that purification of lust, that the desire for selfish enjoyment, I mean basically the bhoga vritti, which that is what we're talking about? Or I always had this doubt whether like purification of lust is the same as advancement in bhakti, or they are two independent aspects. So
yeah, actually, yes, tada rajastamo bhava kama lobha dayasche. So definitely kama and lobha. So kama could mean, yeah, lust for material things, or bhoga vritti as you mentioned. Yes, it is definitely an indicator of one's progress in spiritual life, because Bhagavatam says, Bhakti Pareshanubhavo Viraktir Anyatra Tesha Trika Eka Kala. So, Prapadyamanasya Yatasnatastus Tushti Pushti Shudapayo Anughasam. So, just like when we eat food, with every morsel of food, we feel a sense of pacification of hunger, we feel nourished, and we feel satisfied actually. So similarly, when we progress in bhakti, parallelly, parallel with that progress in bhakti should be pareshanubhava and virakti, or detachment from the bhoga vritti. So definitely it is a symptom of progress in devotional service. But having said that, you cannot use that as a parameter to objectively compare two devotees. Okay, someone is more detached, so he must be more progressed in devotional service, and someone is more attached, so he must not be that advanced in devotional service. You cannot use that as a parameter to compare two devotees, because someone with inherently lot of sattva, he could have taken up to practice of devotional service, and he might have made minimal progress. And someone with a lot of unfavorable rajoguni and tamoguni baggage could have taken up to devotional service, and he could have made significant progress in devotional service, but still he might still have a significant baggage, because he started out the race with more baggage. So you cannot use this parameter to compare two people and say that someone is more attached materially, so he must be less advanced devotee, and someone is more detached materially, so he must be a more advanced devotee. It's not a very reliable parameter to compare two devotees. But definitely, if one can compare oneself 10 years back, 5 years back, 2 years back, and now, if I have made progress or not, based on how much materially detached I have become, or how much my bhoga vritti has gone down. So that way, it is a reliable parameter, but it is not a reliable parameter to compare two people, whether one is more advanced or less advanced based on this principle. Is that okay, bro? Or do you want?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Just adding to the same question, so it could be possible that somebody who is more in Sattva-guna, and he could not even be a devotee. But somebody who is in lower modes, and he's a more advanced devotee in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely, it is possible.
Okay, so
Oh,
okay,
definitely.
yes.
Yeah, it's
So,
just like if, let's say, if there is 100 meters race, um, and if I start the race at the 75th meter, and you start the race at meter number 0, and we start the race at the same time, so it is most likely that I will touch the finish line rope first before you, because I have just 25 meters to cover and you have 100 meters to cover. So, and someone might start the race at minus 50 also, which means severe Rajoguni and Tamoguni conditioning. But he might be much more sincerely practicing than the person who is actually starting at the 75th meter with just 25 meters to cover. So therefore, it is quite possible that someone who is more advanced, if you see, his proportion of Rajogun Tamogun may actually be more than a less advanced person who started with lot of Sattva-guna also. It is quite possible. That is why in Madhurya Kadambini, actually, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur actually presents this provocative case, actually. He says, while discussing Nishta, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, let me present two considerations. On one side is a person who is very humble, very gentle, very tolerant, and all good qualities are there very steadily. But just the only small problem is that his practice of the limbs of devotional service is not so steady. And on the other hand, you have a person who is very arrogant, rude, intolerant, very insulting. But at the same time, if the only good thing with him is he wakes up early in the morning and he performs his devotional duties very regularly, he completes all his 16 rounds before 7 a.m. in the morning, and you can literally set your watch time based on that person. But that is the only good thing, but rest is all bad. He's very arrogant, proud, very like that. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, which is a more reliable indicator of progress or Nishta? So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, the second case is a more reliable indicator of Nishta because uh, uh, he says that Nishta should come first, steadiness in bhakti should come first, then steadiness in qualities will come. This is the only then that steadiness in qualities is a byproduct of one's practice of bhakti. He says, first comes Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati ruttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. So first anartha nivritti comes. Then after anartha nivritti, then comes Nishta, which is steady practice of bhakti. Then comes Tada, Rajastamo Bhava Kamalobha Dayasche Chetete Rana Viddam Stitam Ste Prasidati. Then comes the actual destruction of the influence of Rajogun and Tamogun and enhancement of the manifestation of Sattva-guna. So that should be the order. But anytime you see a reverse order where actually the influence of Rajogun and Tamogun is very less, but at the same time there is not much of steadiness in practice of bhakti, one should understand that this person started out the race at the 75th meter, but at the same time he is running very slow. So it is quite possible. It's very much possible actually.
Okay, yes, Prabhuji. Yes, thank you. Yes,
Okay.
yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. So we will continue the discussion now. I don't see any further hands. So next he talks about giving up adharma. That is the theme. Na dharmam, na dharmam, shrutigana niruptam kila kuru. Na adharmam kuru. That's what Raghunath Das Goswami says. On that theme, Srila Bhakti Vigyan Goswami Maharaj is going to speak here. There are general fundamental principles of renouncing adharma that apply to everyone, which we should follow. He says, in our practice, these are called the four regulative principles, which Srila Prabhupada called the regulative principles of freedom. Very interesting, regulation means actually curtailment of freedom. So Prabhupada is using these two words in conjunction, which is very interesting actually. Regulative principles of freedom, he says. How could it be regulative principles of freedom? Now we will see that now. These are the foundations of Vedic culture. In 1983, there were attempts to recruit me into the KGB. So Maharaj is from Russia. So Maharaj was doing his doctorate, and at that time they tried to recruit him into the KGB. So the KGB is like the intelligence bureau of Russia. So they were trying to recruit him in that bureau, which is known to be quite notorious actually. So he says, I was promised various benefits if I worked for them, and I was also threatened with dire punishments if I refused. I did not want at all to work for them in any way. But at the same time, I was frightened, Maharaj says. I didn't want to work for them, but at the same time, I was very scared. What will happen to me if I say no? Finally, I plucked up the courage and went to the person who had threatened me to give him my final answer. Finally, Maharaj went to him and he told. I stood in front of him, a man twice my size. I was a graduate student then and I was trembling. As I stood before him, shaking like an aspen leaf, I took a deep breath and said, I thought about it and decided that I will not work for you because this does not correspond to my principles. So Maharaj said, look, I understand you gave me a nice offer. I thought about it, but actually I'm sorry I cannot accept this offer because it is not very favorable to my principles. When he heard this, he cried out, what principles do you have except for the four regulative principles? What is the principles that you're talking about? You have only four regulative principles. Like that. Basically, he was indicating that I'm not forcing you to drink, I am not forcing you for illicit sex, I am not forcing you for gambling, I am not forcing you for meat eating. So, how is it that you have only four regulative principles? So how is it that joining the KGB will be against your principles? Like that. So Maharaj says, I was shocked by the fact that even the KGB knew about the four regulative principles. But in essence, these four are the basis for the development of bhakti in our hearts. So if we are breaking these four regulative principles, then it is actually very non-conducive for our progress in Krishna consciousness for two reasons. One reason is that breaking these four regulative principles would naturally mean that we are choosing a tamoguni or a rajoguni lifestyle, which is very non-conducive for bhakti, as we discussed before. And the second reason why it is not favorable is that we gave our vow to our spiritual master. So if we are not properly following the vow, how are we going to progress? like that. So these are the basis of dharma, the basis of happy life in this body, not to mention in the next world. We must clearly understand where this foundation is, because sometimes we have deeply hidden doubts that can make us stray far away. So Maharaj says you should constantly keep questioning yourself, and try to find out what is deeply hidden. What are those deeply hidden doubts about the process? What are those deeply hidden convictions about living a material lifestyle that we may have with deep within our hearts? We hide what we treasure most, so we hide our values. We hide our doubts about Krishna deep in our hearts as something most treasured. We have deep doubts about the process, about Krishna, about the association of Vaishnavas, which we don't reveal because we don't want to be judged. But the problem is that as long as we have these doubts, we cannot endeavor with determination. This nischaya will not come. Utsaha nischaya dhairyat. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his book Bhaktya Loka, while commenting on this principle of nischaya, he says nischaya means to endeavor in devotional service with determination, but one can endeavor with determination only when one is free of doubts. When one is filled with doubts, then it is very difficult to endeavor with determination. As long as I have doubts, um, uh, I can enjoy in this world. When there are no doubts, there are no more chances. When I'm completely convinced about the process, about worshipping Krishna, then that leaves me no chance for enjoying in this material world. So therefore, I keep harboring these doubts, let it be there so that I have some scope for enjoying. Are you sure that the process will work? What if it does not work? Then I lose my enjoyment now, and at the end I don't get Krishna also. So is it really sure? So in deep down we may have these doubts, and actually these doubts give us some scope for enjoying. Yes, anyway I don't know for sure if I will progress or not, like that. In a sense, we should have no doubt in the regulative principles. They are the basis of a normal life in this world. The first regulative principle, no meat eating, is obviously foundational. So Maharaj starts with the basic regulative principle, no meat eating, is obviously foundational. Our hearts become cruel if we eat meat because we become contaminated by living at the cost of another being's life. So it makes us very hard-hearted, because how could just for my tongue, how could I become so ruthless to take away the life of another living entity? Any person with even a little intelligence understands that meat eating should not be done. Because many people, when they come in touch with that sense of cruelty, they tend to give it up. That is why, if you see in the Western world, the slaughterhouses are not called as slaughterhouses. Actually, they are called as meat packing industry. As if meat is manufactured in a factory, and in the slaughterhouse that meat is only packed. So, but if you call it a slaughterhouse, then it sounds very gruesome, and it can actually create guilt in the heart, and many people may actually give up eating meat, because how can they slaughter some living entity to actually give some pleasure to the tongue. So in the Western world, actually the slaughterhouses are called as meat packing industry, so that no one feels guilty, no one understands what exactly it is. I knew a boy, now a young man, who became a vegetarian because his mother accidentally put a rabbit's eye in his stew. Okay, so he was eating that stew or porridge, whatever it was. So by mistake, when his mother, oh, she put, when she had killed that rabbit to make that stew, that rabbit's eye, he saw it floating in a soup or stew, and then when he saw the eye, and he then realized where meat was coming from, and then he stopped eating it. Usually devotees have no problem with following this principle. I also know a 5-year-old boy who became a vegetarian under someone else's influence. Since then, he has been saying to his grandmother, "Grandma, why are you eating corpses? How can you eat these corpses?" And his grandmother replies, "Why are you always spoiling my appetite?" Like that. Because no one, this is very obvious, and this is any person with little bit of, conscience would easily give up meat eating like that. But Maharaj says, but the other three principles are very harder to accept because they are extremely addictive. But there are principles that are harder to accept, such as gambling. The three remaining principles, gambling, intoxication, and illicit sexual relations, have something in common. Our future in Krishna consciousness depends on how well we understand this point. Okay, they have something in common. What do they have in common? They have passion and attachment to the body in common. So all three of them have passion and attachment to the body. Because of attachment to the body, a person does many things that tie the person to the body. So there is intense attachment. In gambling also. I remember, I must confess that when I was in the United States studying, once I had gone to a place called one of the places, Louisiana. I'm sorry, I just remembered it till now, and it just slipped off my mind. Okay, anyway, there is a very famous casino there, and that place, after Las Vegas, this particular place is very, very famous for the casino, which means gambling. So I had never been to a casino or gambled. Maybe I must have done some subtle forms of gambling, I don't know. But so the hotel where I was staying, so we had gone there for a conference. So it was a 4-day conference, and on the first or second day only my presentation was over. So I was just attending other presentations, and in the evening we would go out, and this was before I came to Krishna consciousness, of course. And in the evening we would go and have a nice time, visit various places. Someone told me, "Look, we challenge you. You go to the casino and you show us that you will spend less than $100. So the bet was that you just show us. We challenge you that if you go to the casino, then you will end up spending more than $100. So I said, "Impossible. I accept the bet." So what I did, I just took my ID card and I just took $25 in my pocket and kept my wallet in my hotel room only. And then I went to the casino. So, and then generally, as soon as you go to the casino, the whole thing is developed in such a way that the first thing that you play, you will at least you will win something. So that it will increase your appetite for playing more and more. This is all fixed, match fixing. So So you will win some minimal amount. So you will get the taste of winning. It's not that you will lose everything. So no doubt, I put some $5 or something in the first thing, whatever, I don't remember, and I won some meager amount, and I felt like so hysterical. Actually, literally, I felt like screaming. Uh, I won. They told that I will lose money, but I have gained money. Ideally, I should have, at that moment only, I should have left the casino. But that is how we get hooked. No one leaves. They know that there is an unseen rope that ties people inside the casino. They cannot leave without they lose all their money. So then I got so excited. So then I took that extra money and then I started playing. And within 10 minutes, I lost all the $25. And I was cursing myself. Why did I bring my wallet? Why did I bring my wallet like that? I was really cursing myself. And then I thought I will go to my room and get my wallet and play more. Actually, this time I can win. And also the numbers that come are very close to the numbers you want, and you feel like you just got it. You could have won like that. And then I thought, okay, now I'll go and get my wallet, and I will win more money. So as soon as I left the room and got some fresh air and some fresh lighting, and it's not the dim lights of the casino, which has a very strong rajoguni effect, and it keeps pushing you. So when I experienced the fresh air and some more sort of sattva-guni atmosphere, I came to my senses. What did I do? So it's very powerfully, it's extremely addictive, and it kills our free will. Actually, we become so addicted that it is very difficult to give up. Similarly, intoxication is also like that. Illicit sex is also like that. Once you get hooked, it kills our free will. Even though we know that it is wrong, but it is very difficult to give that up. That's what Maharaj is also indicating here. So our future in Krishna consciousness depends on how well we understand this point. They have passion and attachment to the body in common. Because of attachment to the body, a person does many things that tie the person to the body. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada calls these principles the regulative principles of freedom, which means if you don't indulge in these four things, or if you follow these four regulative principles, then actually you are free to act. But when we start breaking these four regulative principles, then actually we become helplessly addicted, and it becomes very difficult to act according to our free will. Like that. So he says all the four sinful activities enslave us, forcing us to become addicted to the body, so much so that ultimately there is no self-control. Whether we take intoxicants, gamble, or have illicit sex, we will ultimately become slaves to that activity. It may seem like the price we pay isn't so high, but the price is suffering. We may spend some money gambling, but the winnings can be huge. Drugs may cost a certain amount, but we think that the result is worth it. But when we want to buy something very big for a very cheap price, it is called cheating. So whom are we cheating? We think we are cheating someone else. We think, hey, it's such an insignificant price, but I will earn so much, like that. But actually, we think we are cheating someone else, but we are cheating ourselves. Therefore, the ultimate result is pain and suffering, and the inclination to deception becomes increasingly stronger. So the more we become addicted to these vices, the more deceptive we become, because we have to hide it. Otherwise, what will other people think? Okay, of course, this is a very deep subject matter. I don't want to rush this here. So at this point, I will pause we still have 5 minutes time. If there are any quick comments, questions, discussions before we wind up for the day, we will take, and then we will continue this discussion about the 4 regulative principles of freedom that we will discuss. Maybe that's where we will start next discussion. But before we wind up for the day, if there are any quick comments, questions, discussions, I'll wait for a few seconds to see if there are any hands up. Okay. Okay, so at this point we will, it's going to be a little long discussion, and we won't be able to complete it now. So I think we will pause here, and thank you very much for your patient listening. And for those of you who joined late, wish you all a very, very happy Krishna conscious New Year. So hoping that I was just sharing at the beginning of our discussion that in 2020, despite so many hindrances and all that, we still managed to have 22 weeks continuously, 22 weeks of our Manasiksha discussion, and hoping that in 2021 we will continue this trend, and hopefully, for all the 52 weeks without any break, if Krishna's desire is there, we can continue this discussion. And thank you very much for your patient listening, and we will continue this discussion next Tuesday. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Raghunath Das Goswami Pad ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.